let's consider the following. Is there a difference between mind and consciousness? Because generally speaking, when we're communicating with others, we perhaps use these words as if they mean the same thing. Although consciousness is not really used, generally speaking, when we describe how we feel. We might then say, what's on your mind, for example, and stuff like that. We don't really say, what's on your consciousness? Because what we're going to discover is that mind is actually a phenomena that limits consciousness itself to this particular three-dimensional reality. So mind is also the part of us that is programmed and that actually gets in the way of the consciousness that we really are. So if we can see the difference between the two, we can actually learn to work with this in our own lives in such a way that it will help us navigate this journey in an even better direction. We can do it more effectively, pretty much. So it's an interesting thing to ask ourselves. What is the difference between mind and consciousness? Because if we can see the difference through our own contemplation, at least we might recognize more and more where the conflicts come from that we experience mentally. Because that is what we're dealing with. Ultimately, mind is programmed and therefore limited by ideas and beliefs, while consciousness is entirely free, infinite, and one with everything. Has anyone ever asked you, what's on your mind? Or have you ever asked someone that question? The question, if answered truthfully by ourselves or others, shows us what kind of programming they are aware of inside their minds. But what is this awareness that is aware of how we feel, how we actually feel? Well, that is the true nature of consciousness beyond the mind, the infinite awareness itself that you really are. However, the problem occurs when we only pay attention to the concepts and beliefs that have been programmed into our minds from birth and forget that we are eternal observers, eternal awareness, eternal consciousness. Sit back and observe your own thoughts. This way you can see your own mind in action. You have all these thoughts about things and yourself and other people, good, bad, or indifferent, but they're all coming from your mind and not from consciousness. If you can perceive this distinction for yourself, you are well on your way onto the path of awakening. Awakening from the dream of physical existence. You see, you can observe your own thoughts because you are not any of it. You are aware of it, so it's not really you. But most people let the thoughts that occur influence the way that they feel and deal with things, and so they remain stuck inside their own mind, stuck in their own heads. If you let consciousness do your thinking, you are dealing with infinite awareness, for you will be able to expand your thoughts and feelings indefinitely. So basically you are allowing higher perceptions to occur that can instead provide guidance on your physical journey, now that you are here. Your mind has been programmed to follow a set of rules, a set of beliefs, but consciousness can see and know beyond those rules and beliefs. It comes in through your intuition, if you let it. Sadly, most people are not letting themselves be guided by intuition, but instead by logic alone. And this can be a grave error because it severely limits your perspective to three-dimensional space and ignores anything that lies beyond it. So we automatically start to assume the wrong things about ourselves. We start to see ourselves as some sort of physical human being with certain limitations and believe we are those features when they are nothing but a temporary experience that we're having. Mind turns into ego, and ego turns into a limited perception of ourselves, whereas consciousness turns us towards infinity, which is the true nature of existence. Life and death are both concepts made up by mind in this dimension, for it sees things come and go, be born and die, but the consciousness that is aware of these experiences is eternal. That is your real nature, but it was forgotten by the maze of the mind matrix. It is therefore silly to talk about death altogether, to believe that people die when in reality they shift frequencies with their consciousness and become aware of a different reality. Hence why people who physically had died experienced a totally different version of reality, one not bound by the normal laws of physics and limitations. So we're talking here about those near-death experiences, but also people who are technically considered dead, but came back, were brought back to life. And in that moment, no matter how long it was, maybe minutes or sometimes in some cases longer than that, we're talking about hours or days where a person has been brain dead, literally considered a vegetable, not able to function at all. But yet when they were somehow revived from that state, they mentioned they were experiencing all kinds of stuff, even though the brain was not functioning. It's a great mystery to many scientists and medical industry. But that is if we only purely observe it from a physical point of view, and that's not what we want to do. That's the point. Of course, as physical beings, we need our labels to make certain distinctions. So the word death was invented to describe people who simply moved on from this reality into another reality. But for most people, death does not hold this meaning. They will perceive it purely from their programmed minds and see it as something devastating or even scary. But it is really not if you perceive the same event from consciousness that can never die. One moment you are alive, in another moment you might be dead. But the truth is, one moment you are aware of physical existence, and in another moment you become aware of other realms of existence beyond the physical. Is there anything to be scared of when hearing it? No, not really. But perhaps due to ignorance you may still be uncomfortable with the whole premise. But ultimately, to know that you are one with everything and everything is one with you means that you have nothing to fear, for consciousness can reveal all this to you if you let it. How do you let consciousness reveal these truths in your own life? Through your intuition. You take any question concerning life and you let the answer come to you spiritually like that. It does not come from your logical pre-programmed mind, for it can't grasp any of it. But once these two become one, it can become a great power that sets you free from suffering. When you are born into this world, your mind becomes programmed by people around you who have been programmed by others around them when they were born, and on it goes. But if you let your mind become guided by consciousness through intuition, you develop completely different perspectives concerning this current physical journey that you're on. Really think about it. Most people live and die based on the things they were taught by others who may or may not have been spiritually aware. More often than not, the latter is the case, so people live in a state of ignorance with zero spiritual knowledge, or even worse, they scoff the spiritual entirely, for it makes no sense to their minds, which again have been programmed that way. This all shows why it's so important to learn to think for yourself, to come to your own conclusions about stuff, because if we just follow along with the masses, then in most cases we will not be gaining any true wisdom or insights concerning our true nature. The masses just live based on what they were programmed to think and believe. Where's the time for expressing your own divine uniqueness? Nowhere to be found for most people. It can be a fun experiment whenever you are confronted with activities or situations where you notice a great majority acting in a certain way, to then ask yourself, do I also have to act in that same manner or not? A personal example I can give is with certain activities I've noticed where people are having a particular attitude whenever they are involved in said activity, and I realized I don't have to also act in that same manner. I can be totally different. I can approach this activity however I want, regardless of what others are doing or may think of my approach, and by doing so the activity can become even more fun because I'm injecting my own uniqueness into it. Now, I'm not suggesting we completely ignore how others go about it, because we can obviously learn a lot from each other. But in many cases, the way people go about things simply isn't the most ideal way or the most pleasant way, because again, they are operating from a mind that has been programmed by physical beliefs alone. Therefore, it's important to trust in yourself and to obey your own heart in all matters, even if you can feel that you're called upon to approach a given situation from an entirely different angle, which might be cause for ridicule. Don't be afraid to be your true infinite self, that it can approach anything from an infinite amount of angles. When I'm talking about using your intuition another way, it would be to say to learn to listen to your heart in all situations. What does my heart tell me to do? And pay attention to the insights that come from the depths of your being. Don't be shocked that your heart might suggest doing stuff you've never thought of before or never dared to do before. Understand that the fear is due to your mind, which is the very thing we want to outgrow, so consciousness can take charge with its infinite nature instead of the mind with its limiting beliefs. You know, this fear of what others might say or think of us is all part of the mind and not of your eternal consciousness. From the angle of consciousness, there is never any need for fear, because you know you are one with everything and nothing can ever touch or hurt the real you. But mind and ego are always worried about all kinds of physical matters, and so it causes us to suffer if we let it control us. You know, stuff like don't express what you truly feel. You should do from your heart. People might think you're weird or crazy. That kind of stuff we're all familiar with, either because we are like that or we see others being like that. It's a sad state of affairs because it shows we are clearly being controlled by our minds and egos and not our hearts and true infinite awareness. Ultimately, everyone is free to do whatever they want. At least, that's how I look at it. Of course, if what we do specifically causes harm to others, then it would be a nice thing to change that behavior. But other than that, we should just do whatever we want. We can only do it if we break free from the limitations of our own minds and all these weird, preconceived notions of who we are and what we should do or be while on this earth. Your true infinite consciousness can guide you on what to do if you listen to the intuition coming from your own heart. Heart-based knowing comes from beyond the mind, from a higher spiritual realm. That is what we want to grasp and why it's so important to develop this skill while you are here. If we don't, even physical death won't really fix the problem. If we still have not learned to work with our own consciousness, then in those other realms of existence we are still trying to fit in with others over there, instead of learning to be guided by our own uniqueness, because that is what you are, a unique expression of infinity. Why should that be boxed in? It would make no sense once you can perceive this truth for yourself. Another personal example of mine has of course been the problem of addiction. Being addicted for 15 years of my life to alcohol, and it's only recently, after contemplation, I realized I was using alcohol in order to somehow try to sedate my mind, my ego, so that my true consciousness could shine through. But of course, like so many people abusing alcohol or drugs, it didn't really help me out. It made things worse, and God only knows how many people I might have hurt or upset with my obnoxious drunk behavior over those years. Anyways, in regards to that, it has been extremely valuable to realize the true spiritual reason behind my drinking. I already knew that there is more to life than just the physical side we normally experience, but for some reason I was also being haunted by negative thoughts, emotions, and all kinds of weird, pessimistic ideas about myself and my life. It was after I started to recognize for myself the difference between mind and consciousness that I could disconnect from this noise that otherwise haunts me and others for life. You see, many people, they want to escape their own thoughts and emotions. They don't feel good inside their own skin, but it is also because many have not yet experienced their true self, the infinite awareness that they really are. The only suggestion I can give to these people, if they are trying to discover more about themselves, is to really learn to take this process serious, to keep a journal in which you daily write to yourself about stuff you are going through, and then to keep training yourself to use your intuitions on these issues. So you're suffering in all kinds of ways. Regardless, ask yourself, what does my heart tell me to do? How does my heart suggest I look at the situation? If you can truly penetrate into the depths of your own heart, you will be able to discover way better ways of dealing with your suffering, because you're being guided by your true nature and no longer by the limited mind matrix. It is inside your mind that suffering takes place. It is not inside your true infinite awareness. That true nature of who you are can never suffer. There is never any reason for it to suffer, since it's always one with everything. It is mind and ego that has fooled us into believing we are some kind of temporary persona that goes through good times and bad times and ends in the grave. But with this kind of ignorance, your true nature can never fully come to the surface. And that's what we all want to happen. That is what every human is trying to achieve unconsciously. So generally speaking, they first start to seek fulfillment in physical matters and satisfying egoic desires. But eventually they will come to discover for themselves it was all futile. It was... Damn. I messed up there, my narration. Okay, let's go on there. They discover for themselves it was all futile, and what was really needed was to awaken to who we truly were all along. One with everything, eternal awareness with the divine freedom to do whatever it wants. And obviously from such an awakening all suffering comes to an end, because you no longer have any logical reason to indulge in negative states of mind. Of course, this all is easier said than done for most of us, but it will be incredibly useful to recognize when you are indulging in negative mind stuff, with the knowledge that it's not who you really are. So why bother going along with it? So let's end this video with the same thing I mentioned during the intro, and add a little more insights to it. My chair is squeaking. Oh man, I'm getting off track here. It's an interesting thing to ask ourselves, what is the difference between mind and consciousness? Because if we can see the difference through our own contemplation, at least we might recognize more and more where the conflict comes from that we experience mentally. In fact, when any negative conflict arises within ourselves, we can recognize more rapidly, this stuff is coming from my mind, not my infinite consciousness at all. I am experiencing the phenomena of my own mind. I am the eternal observer of it all, and because I can now see it clearly, I can work with it effectively for the rest of my life on this planet. Well, at least, if I have the determination to do so, and not let myself slide back into old habits, where I simply go along with the mind gibberish that is messing with my well-being. Even as I wrote this, I realized at times completely randomly, I might feel guilty or feel it's unfair. If my life can be entirely relaxed while I'm sober, isn't that crazy? That was another part of my addiction, that I felt if I'm sober, the spiritual power and awareness flows really strongly through my entire being. I know this. And then I know I can handle stuff way better, but then I feel like it's unfair because others are greatly suffering out there. Perhaps it's unfair since others are suffering, right? That was my thinking for a long time. So I need to drink to suffer myself? Well, that's weird, but by now I realize I'm having a good time. In all of this, I notice it too, of course. Why am I thinking these things? That is not how I would see this if I was operating from infinite awareness. But it's the mind during our journey on Earth that comes in between who and what we truly are. So most people therefore never truly recognize or experience their true eternal awareness of being while they are going through this journey. This is ultimately what I mean by recognizing when you are functioning from your earthly focused mind or from your eternal consciousness. There is a huge difference between the two concerning the perception they provide of a given situation. That is ultimately the goal, to notice it when it occurs throughout daily life, so we can make better decisions based on spiritual understanding.